the gospel as friendship with God needs to be shared in a friendly way, making connection, greeting people, asking how they are, taking time to get to know people and to notice the things that matter in their lives. That moves me to a second theme. But before we come to that, let me just pick up the story from John's Gospel. You'll remember that the lady has expressed surprise that Jesus should ask her for water. And Jesus has gone on to talk about living water. Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go, call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you've said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We should worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in the spirit and in the truth." The woman said, "I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he'll explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I, the one speaking to you, I am he." Just then, his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. You've got to love the disciples, haven't you? When they turn up and there's this big moment, the big reveal, Jesus has been artfully in conversation with this woman and leads to that amazing disclosure, that revelation of Messiah. And the disciples come along and, oh, look, he's talking to a woman. I really love the stories of the disciples in the Gospels, because quite often they don't look like the sharpest tools in the box, do they? And often they just completely misunderstand, and often they stumble around. And yeah, that's kind of encouraging in a way, because we're disciples of Christ. Disciple means learner, and God is incredibly patient with us as we learn, make mistakes and learn by those mistakes. So today we're wanting to learn from Jesus about sharing good news with others. I've talked about friendship. I want to talk now about conversation, because that's how Jesus operates here. Jesus hasn't come with a pre-prepared 4-point gospel presentation that he's just going to lay out on this to this lady. He interacts with her. He's in conversation with her in a way that hugely respects her, the journey she's on and where she is, her story. It's just an amazing, beautiful thing to watch. My sense is that conversation is vital. The art of conversation, good to learn. I recently read a book by a guy called Doug Pollock called God Space, and it was all about the art of conversation in sharing faith. Doug talks about 4 qualities of conversation. I'm going to give you those right now. To listen, to notice, to serve, and to wonder. Let me give you those again. To listen, to notice, to serve, and to wonder. to listen well to the person we're with, in relationship with, is incredibly important and a precious gift. Actually, whatever that conversation's about, to be listened to well, to be taken seriously, to be honoured within a relationship is absolutely important. And we see Jesus doing that all the time. He is attentive to people. It's beautiful. If we listen well to others, then we will notice things. We'll notice what's important. And when we notice things that are important, we'll often find ourselves with the opportunity to serve, to respond in a very practical way, perhaps, to a person's need. Or maybe simply to pray. How often have you offered to pray for someone in a conversation? Someone who doesn't yet know Christ, isn't part of the church community, but simply said, I'd really like to pray for you. Do you know, my experience has been, and as I've surveyed this a little bit, is that when you offer to pray for someone, rarely will someone say no, and rarely will they be offended by that. It's a beautiful thing, just to pray for someone's back or for a situation that's a problem to them, causing them distress. And sometimes we worry that we won't see the answer to our prayers that we hope for. But you know, it really doesn't matter a great deal whether or not that person's back is healed there and then or later, or not at all. The fact of offering to pray for someone does something. It connects. It opens that person's mind and heart to the good news of Jesus Christ. And it's really good to remember, and I'll just throw this in here, is that everyone's on a journey, and connecting with where somebody is on that journey is important, but also remembering that you're probably not the only person who's going to be Jesus for that person in the next few weeks or in their lifetime. It's good to remember that we make a contribution often, and it's not always our job to take someone to the line, to that place of commitment and surrender to Christ. Often we're making a contribution and there are many players. That's a releasing thought, isn't it? I used to be paralysed when I wanted to share faith with others, because I thought that I had to give the whole story, that I had to get everything out there in detail, leaving nothing out, and get the person to a place of commitment. And that would either paralyse me and I'd say nothing, or I'd say way too much and the person's eyes would glaze over. Let's learn from Jesus about the art of conversation. Listening. Noticing what's important, serving, and wondering. Let me say something about the wondering, because you're probably wondering about that. You know, it's never helpful to interrogate somebody in a spiritual conversation. So, why is it that you've not turned to Christ? Why are you resistant to the love of God? It isn't a helpful approach, is it? But there are ways of going deep with people where you can simply use a wondering question. I wonder what it is that really motivates you in the work you do, John. I wonder. I know you know a little bit about the church, but what do you make of Jesus Christ? Who do you say that I am? Do you see how a wondering question is less kind of confrontational, but actually can go really, really deep? Let me just tell you a little story of a conversation that I had on an aeroplane. I was flying somewhere, I can't remember where, and I was sat next to a young lady. And I'd kind of forgotten my kind of rule of what to do when you sit down on public transport, which my rule is straight away greet the person and get into a little bit of small talk, because the longer you sit there, the harder it is to start talking to somebody. And I'd completely forgotten that. But so it was about a half an hour into the journey, and suddenly there was some help from heaven, if it were. There was turbulence. The aeroplane jolted suddenly, and I said some really profound words to this lady. I said, "Whoa, it's a bit bumpy, isn't it?" And she said, yeah, and she smiled, we exchanged a smile, and I said, "So I'm Steve, what's your name?" And we got talking. God gave me a little bit of help there. Now, as we got chatting, I learned that this young lady was a lawyer, and she'd just started her practice. And she's working for a big company in kind of corporate law. And she was chatting, and I noticed something. I noticed something because I listened well. I noticed there was just a little heaviness in her tone as she talked about her work. So I asked a kind of wondering question. Yeah, it's really interesting listening to you about your work. And I'm just wondering what it is that, excuse me, what it is that motivates you. What took you in the direction of legal practice? Her eyes kind of lit up. She said, because I want to make a difference, because I want to help people who really need my help, the people who are on the edge, people who are disadvantaged. And then she began to say, and I suppose that's why, if I'm honest, it's, I don't know, serving big companies when my heart is to serve those who really need the help. And that led us on into me talking about how Jesus inspires me. Because Jesus is someone with a heart for the poor, for the marginalised, for the people who really needed the help, the people on the edge. She was really interested in that. And she was interested in how Jesus had inspired my life. And so we got talking. And it was a beautiful, natural conversation. Now, I share that just as a little example of how we might be in conversation, listen, notice, wonder, and share the gospel. Now, I'm not sharing it to boast. I'm not just going to look how good I am at this. In fact, I'm really not in a position to boast because I often get it wrong, like the guy on the park bench. In fact, I've got it in mind one day, excuse me. I've got it in mind one day to write a book entitled When Things Didn't Go to Plan. I probably won't really write that book, but I have found that people are surprisingly encouraged when you include stories about falling flat on your face. And because actually that's really how it is. When we seek to serve God in the world and seek to share our faith with others, it's not always one success after another.